Thanks everyone for joining us today. I know it's pretty crazy times for everyone, so we appreciate you taking the time to join the webinar. So just a few intros and housekeeping items. So my name is Mike Smitherman. I'm joined this morning by Marius Moscovici, who's our founder and CEO. He's going to be presenting initially, and then I'm going to take you through a demo of the product later. Just some housekeeping items. So lines are muted, but we're welcoming questions as always through the Q&A or chat window that you can see in the Zoom. As we're all remote here, it's a little challenging to track the questions as we go along. So we're going to leave some time at the end. Feel free to type in your questions as you think of them, and we'll get to them at the end and leave plenty of time to get them answered. The webinar is being recorded, so as usual, we'll send out a link afterwards, and you can always find these posted up on our blog on the website. So the agenda that we're going to go through today is, so Marius in particular has been working with a lot of our customers through this recent times, and clearly, this crisis has made a sort of unique situation, as particularly as it relates to BI and the world that we all play in. And so he's going to be covering sort of what he's seen changing in this period in our customers, and sort of what the challenges with BI has been. And then talk about sort of the need for a BI portal during these times, and how that can really help you navigate the waters. And then, as I said before, I'll take us through a sort of demo of some of the key areas of metric insights that we're seeing heavily used as people navigate the crisis that we're all in. And as I mentioned before, we'll leave plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So again, as you think of questions, you can go down to the bottom of the Zoom. There's the Q&A or chat window. Pop them in there, and we'll get to them. So with that, I'd like to pass it over to Marius. Marius, hi.
Hello.
Take us through the first slides.
Thank you, Mike, and hello, everyone. So I wanted to talk to you guys. We're going to talk a little bit about sort of managing the business through the crisis. And clearly, when a crisis happens, whether it's COVID-19 or really any kind of business crisis, just the fundamental assumptions that drive how the business operates are kind of challenged. Right? So the way that you were working before is not going to work going forward, and you have to really rethink and re-engineer a lot of processes in the business and the way the business operates. A paradigm for that is kind of during that transition period. It's almost like it's a hospital ICU ward is probably a good metaphor for what your organization is going through. Right, your business is the ailing patient that you're trying to make better, and then you have the nurses and the doctors, the skilled care. That's your management. It's trying to understand, what's going on, what's happening with the patient, what are the things that are going to be required to make that patient well, and then your role as a BI professional in that paradigm is really that of kind of serving two roles, two purposes. One is to provide diagnostics and to provide instrumentation. So you're kind of the X-ray, provide the X-rays, the CAT scans, the kind of diagnostics that tell the physicians what is going on underneath. Right, so to let your management know, hey, here are the root causes of what's causing a particular change, what's going on beneath the surface, beneath what's obvious. And then also you're providing instrumentation, those vital signs that tell management what's going on right now. Is what we're doing improving the situation? Is it making it worse? Is it staying the same? What's the overall state and status of the business? And so, as you think about that, through that lens, one of the first things that you have to do is consolidate all of the KPIs from across the organization and kind of coalesce them and present them into a single pane of glass. Right? You've got to give your management that full 360-degree view understanding of all of the critical KPIs across the organization. Right? And to give that holistic views, you can't expect your management to then go through dozens of dashboards and kind of hunt around and find stuff. It's got to all be focused and accessible to them in one place, and it's got to be easy to consume, and it's got to be in a format that can deliver all of the critical KPIs to them at a glance. Kind of digging into that a little further. To do that, you first have to prioritize what are the KPIs you need to measure. Now, many businesses going through any crisis have fundamental assumptions that change, right? Maybe your business before was really focused on growth, increasing top line and revenues. Crisis like COVID-19 hits it. Now, all of a sudden, it's survival mode, right? And so now the focus is going to be on cost containment, perhaps, and cash flow management, and running the core basic operations of the business. And so maybe the things that the management team was looking at day in and day out, it's changed a little bit. It's a slightly different lens that they're looking at, because there's some things that become really important. And so going through that process and really understanding, what's critical, and prioritizing it is absolutely essential, because you don't want to overwhelm your management with so much information that they can't really sift through it and make sense of things. You hear that all the time, that if you basically getting too much information is almost like having no information at all. You don't know where to look. So you want to make sure you're avoiding that and focusing on the key things. Another key item is that you often have to change the frequency at which you measure the KPIs. So things that you were previously measuring on a daily or weekly basis now perhaps need to be measured hourly. It's unlikely in a crisis that, just getting a weekly report on the key stats around the key KPIs is going to be sufficient, right? You're just going to need to be able to up the frequency for those things that are essential, so that you can know immediately as you're taking actions within the business if those actions are sufficient to address the fundamental concerns. So if we think of a retail or a supermarket kind of as an example, in a crisis, you basically have to look at a number of different things, right? You've got to consolidate in KPIs from maybe demand and logistics, revenue, cash flow KPIs. They all have to be pulled together in one place. You've got to understand how HR is affecting those measures as it relates to things like reduction of your health of your workforce, things that you didn't even need to consider before, but all of a sudden they come into play. And you may need to also integrate external indicators, market forces, other things that are happening externally into the view, so that people understand not just what's happening within the business, but what's happening in the ecosystem of your industry as a whole. And then you've got to change and provide those key KPIs and measures in a way that they're coming at the management at a frequency that reflects the rate of change, right? So that as things are changing on a daily basis, you're not showing information that's old. You're not showing information that is really useless to take the action that you need. So for that reason, then, that means that because the paradigms of the business have changed, the existing reporting paradigms break down and have to be rethought as well, right? You kind of rebuilding that from the ground up. So, what's sort of driving that? Well, things are different in the paradigm now, in the reporting paradigms, that everyone tends to be overwhelmed during a crisis. There's so much information coming at people. There's so much that has to be done. It's really easy to kind of lose track of what's important and what needs to be done. So, and decisions have to be made very quickly, right? The source of information often change. So you might have a disruption part of your supply chain. Now that new part of your supply chain is feeding that information to you. Perhaps there's things that are not even being tracked in a system. Maybe there's some critical information that is being tracked in Excel now that has to be brought and surfaced into the system and consumed by your executives. So all the things that are assumptions that existed before, some of those may not be there anymore. And so you've got to be able to flexible to address the different information sources. And then context and speed becomes critical, right? So you can't, going back to that hospital analogy, you would never think, the CAT scan operator can't really tell the ICU doctor, hey, I've taken a CAT scan of the patient, and I'll send that to you a week and a half from now, right? You just can't do that. You've got to be able to respond very, very quickly. So in BI terms, that has to be, instead of getting something done in maybe weeks, now you've got to be able to do it in days or hours. You've got to present the information in context so people understand not only what the number is, but why that number is important and how it actually is being impacted by events that are going on. And then you may have to do all of this with reduction in staffing happening, whether that's people being less effective because of the disruption associated with the crisis, or due to layoffs or cost reductions. You've still got to respond to the business, even in the face of all those changes. And then you've got to be able to manage this in an environment where your infrastructure is perhaps less reliable. So, case in point, we're all working from home. What if the person you're trying to reach doesn't have reliable network? They're not on the regular PC, they're on their laptop or on their phone. How do you make sure that given that change in infrastructure, you're still able to deliver what the business needs? So, BI portal, we believe, is a key cornerstone of a solution for a crisis management platform. And what the key things around that is that you've got to be able to have a portal where communication is really effective, right? That BI portal facilitates making sure that all the stakeholders see all the key KPIs behind a single pane of glass. They understand how everything fits together. BI portal allows you to connect to everything, right? So I need to be able to source those analytics from wherever they are, bring them all together, and be able to access that data, irrespective of whether that data is in your data warehouse, it's in a news source, it's external, it's in a spreadsheet somewhere. Keeping people focused. So avoiding that scenario where now all of a sudden you're throwing so much information at folks that they're overwhelmed, they don't know what to do, right? Getting people really to understand exactly what they need to pay attention to right now. And then making sure that there's a mechanism by which all the analytics are simple and easy to consume, right? So you're not making your users go through, 12 different dashboards and changing filters on all those dashboards or digging through an email that contains an Excel spreadsheet where all the information is super dense and you've got to kind of decipher rows and columns of data to do that. No one has time for that. So making sure that the consumption model for getting at the information is easy enough that does not get in the way of the executives being able to use that information to make the right decisions. So taking that kind of to a functional level, that means that there has to be a lot of speed in the execution. So you've got to be able to onboard a new data source and show KPIs, show analytics from that in a matter of minutes or hours, not a matter of days or weeks. You don't have the luxury to say, hey, we'll put this into the next sprint. Next sprint we'll do the data onboarding. The sprint after that, we'll go and build the dashboard, and then we'll deploy it to you. It's got to be very quick for the data that comes to light due to a crisis. There has to be clarity of context around the data. So, it's not enough to just show information. You will need to be able to show it in context so that your business team understands, why things are happening, and that insights that come out of the deep analysis that typically BI teams do during these processes are widely shared and visible within the organization. Very important. In addition to kind of the high-level insights, you got to be able to get to detail. So I said you don't want to overwhelm your users with detail, which is true, but you need to make sure that you do give them access to the detail when they need it. So give me as an executive a high-level management number, what's going on, how are things trending, and then let me go from there to drill down to go into the details. What's behind that number? What's causing it? What's driving it? Get the fundamental understanding that's required to take action, and then it has to be accessible. So wherever I am, I should be able to get to the key analytics, whether I'm looking out on my phone, whether it's coming to me via email, whether I'm in Slack or Microsoft Teams, wherever it is that I'm working collectively with the rest of my management team. If I'm a manager trying to set a business right, I need to be able to access those analytics. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look at a demonstration. I'm going to hand it over to Mike, who's going to go through kind of how Metric Insights addresses these fundamental needs and give you some specific examples.
Thanks, Marius. If you want to stop sharing your screen, I will I'll take over. Okay, so Marius, maybe you can just confirm that you're seeing my screen now.
I am.
Great. So thanks for that, Marius. So as we just said, so I'm going to take you through sort of an overview of the Metric Insights platform and BI portal as it relates to those areas that Marius was just talking about. And just to tee that up, there's really a few key points that we're going to be touching on. The first is this concept of being able to connect to everything within the organization. And so you'll see that's whether that's cataloging things from your existing BI tools, whether it's pulling in new data from different sources. The ability to plug into these tools is critical in terms of getting data out to the business. And as we go through the demo, we'll touch on how you get that data into the platform and organize it in a way that's useful to your users. We'll touch on how you can really uncover critical changes within that data in the form of anomalies or exceptions that you may want to communicate out to users. And then thirdly, this concept of distributing information. In the current climate, you can't always rely on people to log into a particular portal or site to see this information. You need to push it to them. It needs to be accessible in an online or offline format, and so that they're not missing anything as they're going through the crisis and managing to it. So as we go through the demo, I'm going to touch on these different areas and show you some of these details. And with that, I'm just going to flip across to my my browser window here. I'll just give that a second to refresh. So what you're looking at here is the Metric Insights application. So it's running through the browser. I'm logged in as an admin initially into the system. And this instance of Metric Insights is connected to all our BI tools that we're using within this demo organization. So that's tools like Tableau, Power BI, Click, Cognos. We have different systems being used across the business that we want to make available to users. And what you're looking at here is essentially our catalog view, our library view, where each of these tiles is linked to a particular data source and a particular piece of content that we want to publish from that data source. And so I have things, again, coming in from Tableau, from Power BI, and other tools. And what the application does and the plugin does to those tools is when I click on a particular tile, we pick up essentially an image of what that dashboard looks like for the users. So very quickly, I can get a quick preview of that piece of content based on the last time it updated. And I can drill into that piece of content, in this case, taking me into the live Tableau dashboard, where I can navigate as I usually would and see that. And I, in this case, didn't have to know necessarily that this was a Tableau dashboard, or that if I clicked on, I go back to the home page and click on another of these tiles here, that I was going into, say, Power BI in this case, rather than Tableau. And so to the user, we want to publish this content. We want to pull it into a single place and remove this need for users to have to go and hunt for data. Now, as Marius said, whilst we want to get all our existing content that's critical into one place, oftentimes, there's this need to bring in new data very quickly and publish that for users in a way that's very consumable. And so I just want to touch on the ability to bring in that new data very quickly and get something out to users in minutes rather than hours and days. And so within Metric Insights, we have this concept of what we call data sets. And this is a way, again, of how I can use our plugins to essentially pull data into the platform very quickly. So I actually have some data related to the current COVID-19 crisis. So I'm just going to create a data set around that. So I can set the name. I can then say, okay, where is the data coming from that I want to pull in? And again, we have various plugins to different tools and databases and operational systems, or it may be that you're just manually capturing this data, or files are being exported to you with key data in. And so I'm going to do this manually here, but automatically we may be picking up new files of information from a file system or FTP site. But essentially, I can go and start to easily load data into the platform that I want to share with my users. So I have a CSV here that contains some details of new cases as it relates to COVID-19 in this case. If I load that data in, it's essentially, in this case, for this data set, going to start snapshotting data. In this case, I'm doing it on a daily basis, but depending on the frequency of the data, it could be every hour, every day, whatever makes sense for your information. It's pulling that into the Metric Insights platform. I can start to create a view onto the type of data that I want to create a report on. So in this case, we're looking at data that's related to new cases over time by different countries. I'm going to save that as a view here. And we're going to go and create some tiles based on this data. And so within Metric Insights itself, we can start to create different views in addition to your dashboards and reports that might be coming from the other tools. So one thing we might want to do is actually build a report on this data. So I can select that from the data set, and I get brought into the Metric Insights report builder. I can easily drop different charts and information onto the page. So maybe we want to look at a trend for the new cases across the world. Maybe we want to look at that by country. So I can easily create different visualizations onto this data. So we've got our cases by country, and let's, for the sake of it, drop a table on here as well. So we'll look at the actual numbers across the different countries. So very quickly, I can start to build up a view onto that data that I've imported that's going to be importing now on a daily basis. So add a date filter up here for our users. And when I apply that, I can save and essentially publish that into the portal. So now we have our new report. If I go back to the home page that we were looking at before, this becomes a tile on our home page that I can now publish and make available to my users alongside the other content that we're pulling in from our other tools. So hopefully you can see it's quick and easy to be able to add new data into a system, create reports in the system, and a Metric Insights report can be a tile that, again, you can add alongside your other content that you're pulling in from the other tools that we were looking at before. Another type of tile that you can add as well as a report, Marius mentioned the importance of sort of bubbling up summary data to users, making sure your execs are getting your critical metrics and that they're seeing that front and center. If we go back to our data set that we pulled in, as well as that report that we had, we can also create what we call metric tiles within the platform. And so I'm going to go here and build a metric on this data. So this is our daily COVID-19 cases. So I'm going to sum the number of cases, and I want to look at that across different countries and regions. I can easily create what we call a metric tile within Metric Insights and go and build that metric. It's looking at cases, again, by country. And if I go back to our homepage here, when I do that, I can start to create these tiles that actually have values on them. So when I created that metric, then it's basically taking the number of cases, it's dimensioning it by countries, it's actually doing some basic analysis and color coding around that. And so I start to get these metric tiles that I can include in the portal, see what's under, overperforming, very easily start to see the numbers that we want to track within the organization. And so by bringing all these different types of tiles together, we go back to the original screen we were looking at, I can pull together content from these different tools. I can add in metric insights reports. I can add in metrics. I can organize them in a way that makes sense for my users by categorizing them or dropping them into logical folders. I can tag that content in a way that makes it easily searchable. And provide this essentially portal for users where they can come in and easily search for things that they have questions about, and sort of a Google type search paradigm recommends content. If I search for it, it goes away and looks through the metadata that we capture around each of these assets, whether it's external things, whether it's internal reports, whether it's metrics, and gives people an easy way of finding that content. So once you've got this environment where you can get content out there quickly, then the question becomes, okay, how do I better publish this content to my users? And so I just have another browser open here where I'm logged in as another user, an end user, if you like, on the platform. When an end user comes into the system, typically their permissions will dictate what they have access to in terms of categories and tiles, and even slices of data within tiles that they may be interested in. So in this case, I might be responsible for a particular region, and I only see sort of that slice of data. Even within your existing content, if I open that Tableau dashboard that we were looking at before, because I'm responsible for this region, I can be mapped to that particular filter value. So whenever I open content that has country slices within it, it's going to automatically filter it down to what I'm interested in. So again, making it quick and easy to get to the relevant data that a particular user is interested in without having to do a lot of navigation and slicing and dicing. So we can make the content that's available within the portal relevant to a particular user. We can then present that content in various different ways. One way is through the concept of what we call portal pages. And think of these as sort of a blank page, a blank sheet of paper that you want to drop different elements for a user onto, different tiles for a user onto, and summarize their world in a very quick and easily consumable way. So in this case, it may be an exec type view where we really need to track sort of the impact that the different areas of the business are having right now in a single place. It's summarizing key metrics from each of those departments that we're pulling in, showing me how they're performing. It gives me access to the details if I need it. So if I want to drill into something, it may take me into a detailed dashboard within another tool. So in this case, Tableau, or it may take me to a metric insights report where we pulled in data. But very quickly, I can get a summary of my world. Communication is key during these times. So the ability to add what we call announcements into the portal. So communicating things that are going on related to the current situation, whether it's updates on things like, in this case, supply chain and how that's affecting us, whether it's technical updates where we're having infrastructure challenges and data's not available, and making people aware of that as they're making decisions on this information. We can communicate these announcements out to people. So portal pages, and again, these can look and feel any which way you want. Portal pages are a way of sort of summarizing a particular user's world, getting them the information they need, obviously takes into account permissions and security, and ensures that they're just seeing metrics that they have access to and information they have access to. Um, so the portal's great for communicating this data, but as we mentioned before, you know, particularly during times like these, people are working from home, people are working remote. They don't necessarily always have access to the systems within the business. There can be challenges with networks and home networks. And so we want to make sure that this data is available in multiple places. And the obvious one is emailing this information out. And so there's the ability to take this content and effectively distribute it via email to users. And so an example might just be taking this page that we're looking at here and pushing that out to a user via email every day or on a schedule every hour, whatever the schedule is that makes sense for the data that you're pulling in. And so there's the ability to combine content from different sources, whether it's metric insights or metric insights and other BI tools, put it all together in a single email. Again, hyperlink out to the details and send that to users on a particular schedule. Another way of thinking about this as well as it relates to emails is enabling users themselves to really self-service around this data. So, you know, as Marius mentioned, with staffing challenges, whatever it might be, we're all overwhelmed with this new environment that we're working in. You know, the last thing we need is a line out the door of people asking us for more data and send us this email, or can you pull this together, when all that data is probably available already. And so allowing users to self-service in terms of what they want to receive and what they're interested in is important as well. And there's various ways you can enable them to do that. As users are accessing tiles within the portal, at any point they can subscribe to content that they're interested in simply by clicking on the envelope, selecting the slice of data that they're interested in, and having that added to hourly digest or sent on a daily basis, whatever makes sense for them. I can also, as a user, drag tiles into a personal favorites folder. So by pulling tiles from different sources, metrics, dashboards into my favorites, I get an easy shortcut to that content. But that's also content that can be pushed out to me on a schedule as well. So maybe in this case, I'm getting a daily digest, which is summarizing the content that I have within my favorites folder. It's giving me visibility into, you know, what are the key metrics that are changing in my favorites, have any metrics generated, alerts or anomalies that we'll look at in a minute, and did any of my dashboards that I'm tracking update? And if they did, send me an image of what that dashboard looks like, again, potentially pre-filtered to my slice of data. And so in a single email, as an end user in the business, I can pick and choose what I'm interested in. The system will then start tracking that and start pushing me out a digest every time things change within that content. Another way we can think about distribution is, and particularly in these times, is having the portal or the platform look out for changes happening within the data and alerting us to critical events that might be happening. And so things like the metric that we created before. So we created that metric tile, if you remember, that was on our homepage. If I just go back to the homepage here, if you remember, we created these metrics across the different countries and the number of new cases within those countries. If I drill into a metric, essentially metrics are, again, this way of tracking time series data across the organization. So in this case, daily, could be hourly, could be even more frequent than that. And again, we're looking at this across different countries in this example. And when we pull metrics into the platform, we're actually analyzing how those metrics are changing over time across, in this case, all the different countries that we're tracking. When we do that, we can start to, again, stoplight this information. So in this case, it's looking, for increases or decreases of more than 10%, and that was the color coding that you were seeing on the tiles on the home page. We do things like run statistical analysis against the time series to look for outliers, and in this case, this is looking at standard deviations against a moving average and looking for stuff outside of that. And you can see with what we've been going through that it's been a huge steep curve that's always been outside of those standard deviations. So statistically significant points as it's increased. But I can start to set up my own alert rules against this data or against any metrics that we pull into the system. So for example, we may want to track that daily increase of cases, and we may want to know when it's more than, say, 20% over the previous day. So we can look for that. I can choose to be alerted on it every time it happens. I can simulate alerts based on historical data. So if we go and simulate this over the last 30 days for all the, if we go to all the regions, all the values here, it will go out and start saying, okay, how many times would this alert have triggered across all our different countries over the last 30 days? And again, you can see there's been a real steep growth here. And across those countries, we're seeing a lot of 20% day-over-day increases against this particular time series. And so I can simulate it. I can see how many times the alert would have fired by the different countries. Interesting to go and look at, say, the US particularly. How many times would this alert have fired over the past 30 or 60 days? And we can see the areas in the time series where we were getting significant increases, in this case in the new cases that were coming in. But anyway, I can set up my alert criteria against this or our business metrics. I can set up the alert that I want to go out to myself or the users that I'm doing this on behalf of. I can customize the alert message and even the payload of what gets sent with the alert. Is it a metric? Do I want to send a dashboard? Do I want to send it via email or phone or SMS if it was that critical? And I can even tie it to basic workflows that, if it's a critical business metric, we may want to assign this alert to someone when it actually triggers, and have them responsible for pushing it through a particular process to getting it resolved, and seeing sort of the outcome of what happened within a particular alert. And so when I set alerts up, again, if we go back to our email, if we're sending this via email, we can obviously, different alert here looking at sales, but send the condition that was met, tie it maybe to a dashboard that has the details pre-filtered to where the alert fired, and give users the ability to drill into that when it happens. I can take these alerts as well. We talked about assigning them to a workflow. We can also add collaboration and context to this information as well. So if I go back to the chart, at any point, users with the privilege can come in and essentially annotate different data points if they want to add context to what's happening within this particular metric or a particular dashboard. And that will create a sort of ongoing news feed and ongoing commentary around what's happening within the data. And we store that information historically, so you can go back in time and look at what's happening and what the comments were that got added. You can tie event calendars to the time series as well, and these can be sourced from anywhere or added manually. So if there's events happening that are impacting the business metrics, you can have those as overlays on the charts and be able to again look back historically and say, okay, what happened and how did that impact the data that we're pulling in. So taking those metrics that we had that are being summarized and overlaying alerts and context is again a way of essentially adding useful information to the data, summarizing it for your end users, and keeping them focused on what's important. And then one final, I guess, way of looking at changes in the data is through the concept of pulling out exceptions. And so if we go back to this dashboard that we were looking at earlier from Tableau, as Marius said, we create a lot of powerful dashboards within our organizations. So in this case, looking at multiple metrics in the sales business by different countries and channels and product categories that we're selling. But in today's world, most users do not have the time to be going through and analyzing all these filter combinations, looking for where things occurred within the business that changes may have occurred that are significant. And so in Metric Insights, you can start to set up rules that look at how the data is changing across all these filter combinations, in this case, day over day, and set up rules that look out for things happening. So for example, show me the filter combinations where sales drop more than 50% day over day. And so by combining those exceptions with the underlying dashboard, you're giving the users, what was thousands of combinations narrowed down to half a dozen that they can click on and easily jump to where those issues occurred and still get the details of what's going on for those combinations. And again, that might be something that I want to subscribe to and get pushed to me via email. Here's the exceptions, and here's an image of the dashboard pre-filtered to that, hyperlinked back into it. So we're coming up against time, and we want to leave time for questions here at the end. But again, in summary, it really nails down to pulling information together, being able to add new data into an environment, and be able to very quickly create reports and views for your users. Combine that with your useful content, alert them to any issues that are happening within that content, and make sure that they can access this information anywhere when they need it. We looked at email, but obviously mobile or other tools that you might be using, such as collaboration tools like Slack or Teams. So with that, we're at 11:45. Let's answer any questions that may have coming in. And so again, please enter any questions in the chat or Q&A window, and we'll get to those. And whilst we're looking at those, just something that we are offering at this point in time, given the current situation and the need for better data, if anyone is interested in piloting Metric Insights at this point and pulling in sort of the key metrics to track in the way that we've been looking at, we're offering up a free pilot of the platform where we'll help you get it implemented and connected to your key sources, and let you use that throughout this period to manage the business. So if there's interest in doing that, please reach out to me at mike@metricinsights.com, and I can put you in touch with the appropriate people to get that going. So with that, Marius, how are we looking on questions here?
We have some questions here. Let's see if we can get to them here. So we have a question: what are the challenges to organize multiple sources in one place? And typically the big, typically I'm not sure if the question is in context of the a general challenge or with the Metric Insights. So generally, of course, the challenge is that the process of onboarding data into your data warehouse before you're going to do reporting on it can be quite involved and extensive. With Metric Insights, it's actually, as Mike showed you, it's very easy to pull in data. We have connectors to any database, so anything JDBC, and anything that's sort of web-oriented. File comes in as a flat file, FTP, Excel, etc. All you have to do is kind of, as like Mike showed you, just have to kind of select the columns that you want to pull in from that source. Excuse me. If it's a database, write the query, and then you can pull it in. And then what happens is, within Metric Insights, insights, that's instantiated as a data set. And so this has been, that's sort of the idea, right? And then once you have that data set, you can then combine it with other data sets. You can join them using SQL against our environment. We have our own data store that you can use. It's either MySQL or SQL Server, and it can hold all of these data sets that you've pulled in from other places, and then you can work and collaborate and combine them and consolidate them. So I think that's sort of the answer to that. Is it's fairly straightforward.
I would add that, you know, the benefit of accessing, you know, cataloging all this content in one place is within an individual data. So if you're talking about BI tools in particular, you know, I'm connecting to Tableau, I have different sites and projects, and then I go, we're using, you know, Click as well, and that has that folder structure. And so as a user, not only do I have to know which source to go to, I have to know which site and project and folder to go to access this content. By pulling that together into a logical structure within your portal, you know, you have one hierarchy to navigate rather than multiple hierarchies. And so, you know, whether you're organizing that by department or business function or whatever makes sense, it's more logical for your users to then be able to find that.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. So another question here was, what frequency could you collect metrics at? How quickly? To answer that, you know, we can collect everything down to the minute. So we do have customers that collect KPI data every minute, every 5 minutes, you know, for maybe things like, you know, commerce traffic on their website, things like that. More common is probably every 50 minutes, hourly, daily, and beyond that are sort of the most frequent scenarios. But obviously, as we talked about at the beginning, sometimes that high frequency data is very relevant, especially in crisis management, where you want to immediately know if something's going on. So, you know, you're not, now again, you're not using metric insights as a system monitoring tool or truly real-time type monitoring, but for KPIs, for business metrics, it's absolutely possible to do that at a fairly near real-time level of granularity. We have another question here. How will the tool adapt when we return to regular operation when the crisis is over? And that, I think that's a really good question. You know, you go ahead and you create these crisis management portal pages and KPI management, and like Mike showed you. And so what happens when that crisis is over? Typically, there's just a, you know, we'd expect to be a reconfiguration. So you really reevaluate those KPIs just like you did going into the crisis, and you say, okay, well, now what does the business really need to focus on and go forward? And some of our customers that have actually used us, you know, through this process have noted that, you know, they really want to, you know, one of the hopefully few good things that will come out of this is that they hope that their management teams, now that they've really get them KPI focused, you know, using the portal, looking at all the key metrics through this process, that then they can just transition that to maybe a slightly different set of metrics, but keep that discipline going forward with ongoing KPIs that they need to measure. Okay, here's a question. Can we present COVID-19 data to users without licenses in those tools? So I think that probably refers to a situation where you've got some data, maybe that data is in Tableau, and you need to sort of communicate it more broadly than to the folks that actually have Tableau licenses. You know, you need to go beyond that and be able to show them that. And yes, you can do that. You can do that with metric insights, both from a data perspective, kind of, you know, we can connect it and pull that data out and then distribute that to folks in a native metric insights visualization, as well as you can actually do that with the images as well. So what happens is behind the scenes, there's actually a service account that collects the images, so you can distribute images of those visualizations that you have beyond the population that currently has licenses for it. And that's actually, even outside of crises, that's one way in which some of our customers have found that they can, you know, keep costs down by making sure that the licenses for their BI tools are given to folks that are really going to be doing the ad hoc analysis, and then those folks that just need to look at a little bit of data or look at an image, that, you know, they push that out in metric insights. It's a much more cost effective way. And there's another question here. Does MI abide by our existing security infrastructure? We don't want users to be able to see content they're not authorized to see. So that's a great question. And yes, what we do is we integrate with your corporate LDAP, Active Directory system, for group synchronization, so that way folks only get to see the content that they're authorized to see, based on the group management that you've set up. And then we also integrate with your SAML system for single sign-on, so that we don't actually hold credentials for users, but rather that when a user comes in and they want to use the metric insights, they sign in through the usual single sign-on process that you have in your enterprise, typically. And so that way, once they've signed in into any application internally, they already automatically get signed into Metric Insights, and then we know who they are, so that we use that information from our Active Directory integration to show them the right content. And that looks like that's it for questions.
Last call for any more questions. So thank you all for joining us today. Thanks, Marius, for joining us. As I mentioned before, we've recorded this, so we'll be posting it on the blog, and you'll be seeing an email with a link to that. If there are any questions again, or interest in taking this up on the pilot, then reach out to myself, mike@metricinsights.com. And if not, we hope you'll join us on our next webinar. Look out for the invite. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.